So there's some question as to whether or not 3D printable files themselves from scans have any copyrightable content to begin with. When I scan a shoe, when I scan a plant, something that's around the office, if I'm making miniatures for dollhouses or model railroads, if somebody takes my scan and copies it or does something else with it, how much of an objection can I make under copyright law? And so we might look for an answer like that in an older case called Franklin Mint v. National Wildlife Art Exchange. In 1972, Mr. Stewart decides that he wants to start a company to sell wildlife prints. So he hires a famous painter to do a watercolor of a couple of cardinals. And the two have something of a falling out. A few years later, Franklin Mint hires the same painter to paint a painting of cardinals. He uses the same reference materials. You can see similarities between the two. And Mr. Stewart, the guy who hired him to do the first painting, says, "This second painting looks just like the first painting, which I own. I'm mad now. It's a copyright infringement." Franklin Mint says, "No, it's just a painting of a cardinal. You can't copyright a painting of a cardinal." And the court looks at the two and says, first of all, let's just bear in mind, you can copyright a painting of a cardinal. The concern here is, does the second painting infringe the first painting? It compares the two. It says, yeah, I see some obvious similarities, but also we see some dissimilarities. The male is at the top in the one painting and it's in the bottom in the other painting. There are slightly different strokes. The flowers look just a little bit different. It's clear that they are two separate paintings. Even though they are paintings of the same bird and maybe even the same reference materials, they look similar in part because of the conventions of the medium. And this is where we get into things that are important for 3D printing. If you're making a book of wildlife portraiture, it's going to look naturalistic, it's going to look unadorned, and in some ways that's what we're trying to do when we do 3D printable scans. We're trying to say, this is a real shoe, and I'm making a scan of a shoe that looks exactly like the shoe that I just saw, or this is a scan of a plant, and I'm trying to make a 3D scan of the plant that is real in the real world. So the court in Franklin Mint looks at it and says, look, no one can monopolize the idea of painting a cardinal, nor of painting a natural scene in a particular style. You're going to find the same thing when you're looking at a scan. The idea of scanning something from real life can't be monopolized. And the copyright in such works will necessarily be thin. It's going to almost require, as the court says in National Wildlife, almost a line-by-line copying. The similar line-by-line copying that we might find in 3D printing is the code. Line by line of code. Well, then that indicates that maybe it's a different kind of copying, that it's a copying of software and of a literary work rather than of a pictographic sculptural work, a PGS work, which is really what the concern was here in National Wildlife. So if you make a 3D scan of an object for one party and sell them all the rights, and you make a 3D scan of the same object and sell it to another party, Franklin Mint tells us there's not a whole lot of copyright protection in that first scan. And if the first buyer gets really angry, based on Franklin Mint, copyright may not be the answer to that problem.